All right, we're back. I know it's been a minute, but we're going to talk about two of my favorite things, local LLMs and DSPy. So why do I like DSPy? Well, fundamentally, everything in software engineering is an abstraction, right? It's a game of where do you cut the abstraction. And for the same reason as why I like Palantir, I think DSPy cut the abstraction at the right place for like its domain of functionality. And to make that a little bit more clear, like in the in the world of how do you get value from data and AI and information, there's a ton of different platforms who have built little like agent wrappers, right? Like Copilot Hub or whatever it's called, right? Like things that make it really easy to write agents, right? Or write little wrappers around an LLM. But that is never the hard part, right? And that's never been the hard part. The hardest part has been getting getting data and combining it with human understanding of the business problem, encoding that into the data, and then like the AI part on top of that's pretty freaking easy, right? And Palantir was like one of the few companies where I felt like did that massive problem correctly, right? This is going to be a much lower level problem, right? Where with DSPy, the issue that I feel like they're trying to solve is how do you make it easy and predictable to work with an LLM and to get out of the game of like prompt engineering and make it a little bit more consistent, repeatable, have a framework that enforces a good process and practice in how you actually develop, test, and ultimately deploy models. So the way that we're going to talk about this is we're going to kind of go through the code as well as talk through a business use case for the pharma medtech space. And we'll kind of weave that into an explanation of the tool, showcasing how all this stuff works together. And so hopefully at the end of it, it'll be not just, hey, this is a tutorial, but this is a tutorial and now I understand how I can apply it. All right, so first things first, where is this located? This is my unlogged in GitHub. So this should be fully public. You can go take it, play with it, whatever. I always like to do tutorials by just looking at the code myself and maybe kind of listening to someone else talk about it. So for those of you who are like me, have fun. Okay, so let's talk about the use case first and foremost. Let me actually move this. So it's going to make a little bit more sense if like we zoom in a little bit. And we'll talk about the Swagger page and what that is. Ultimately, it's the serving endpoint for the primary use case. But first things first, let's ground on the business problem. So within the pharma medtech space, they have a huge volume of people who are calling to explain a problem that they've had with the medication. And at the time of intake, you really don't know what that is, right? Is it someone who's stupid and like did not use it correctly? Is it someone who's having allergic reaction? Is there a problem with the actual drug? Is there a quality control problem and maybe one of the suppliers or one of the distribution channels has an issue, right? Like you hear someone say something, it could be absolutely nothing, or it could be, hey, this is life-threatening and we need to recall the entire product. And so how do you actually like handle and encode that complexity? And from like a why is an LLM a good fit here? Fundamentally, this is a very resource-intensive process, and it's one that I don't think is particularly high skill. And because of that, it's kind of what I see as like a perfect fit problem, where it's a lot of people who are required to do it. So that means there's a large opportunity, and it's something that doesn't have a ton of nuance, and so there's an opportunity to safely inject an LLM and as well as like additional like points in the process where there could be a check to make sure that what the AI did is correct. So how does this work? So first things first, let's just start with the top part here. So there's something called a complaint, or more specifically, it's called a complaint narrative. This comes in from the various different call centers. So let me just like draw some here. Okay, so you'll maybe have like call center. You'll have email. Maybe you'll have a couple other sources as well. And these come into here. There's going to be some degree of like transcription as well, especially for like global companies. But you'll ultimately end up with a complaint narrative, which is just a text description of basically the conversation. So from there, you very quickly want to determine, is it a product complaint or is it an adverse event? And why that matters is a adverse event could be something very serious and something that you have to get to and understand quickly, because as I'm sure if you've ever like seen some of like the recalls and whatnot, right? Like a bad drug or an issue with the manufacturing of a specific batch could have huge like health consequences for people, and you want to get ahead of that quickly. In addition, it's handled typically by a different team. It's called like the safety team or quality safety team. So it also needs to go to a different group. Okay, product complaints on the other hand are you have a little bit more time to deal with it, and the game with product complaints is weeding through the 95% of noise to get to like the 5% of complaints that have enough information and haven't been something that someone else has already said a bunch of times and already has like a kappa assigned with it. So you want to basically distill one group, and the other one is you want to hyper analyze and make sure that there isn't a time sensitive problem with the other. Okay, so let's say that we're going to use, actually let me flip the order. So I'll say this one is going to be product complaint. Why did that not work? Okay, so once you've classified it correctly, each of these will have their own sets of trees. And I'm not going to draw each of them, but just like imagine, hey, there's going to be a bunch of lines that come off here. Because you need to categorize each of these a certain way. And there's various reasons, and those reasons differ based on whether you're talking about an adverse event or a product complaint. Doesn't really matter for the sake of this, but point being is there's kind of two stages of classification that needs to be done. So let's get into the code. And just forewarning, this is going to be at a very high level just because I don't think it's a good use of anybody's time to just talk through it when you have a personal tutor with OpenCode or Cursor or whatever AI tool that you use. But I'll at least talk about like the overall architecture and where things fit and what they do at a high level, so you understand how to position the puzzle pieces. So first things first, the components that are relevant, I'll just show you what those are, and then we'll walk through some of the logic. So within the data, you're going to need to have a set of test and train, and I'll quickly showcase one of those. So in this case, right, this is for the selection between, is this an adverse event or a product complaint? Complaint, the label, and the reasoning, right? Then the other piece that's going to be relevant is going to be source. This is really where the majority of the logic actually resides. And let me pull this out. All right, so I'm going to quickly diagram this just so it makes a little bit more sense. But the first step here is you're going to start with data. Now, I synthetically generated mine. This is like, there's like patient data in there, but like if you're a real organization, you'd be taking real system data as well as like the actual correct answer of what the selection was. And you're going to say labeled, and then the reasoning component, you may or may not have that. You may or may not actually need that either. Okay, but point being is you're going to have your labeled data. From there, it's going to enter into a flow. And this flow, I'm going to explain it at a conceptual level. I'm not going to say it's like quite accurate, but at a high level, it's going to be running it through a pipeline. This pipeline is evaluating. Here's our base prompt, right? It says base prompt plus X, right? And that plus X is going to be a change to the prompt or an addition to it. Maybe that's like, here's an example, right? Whatever the X is, it's going to run through in a loop until you hit like the checkpoint to mark it as complete. It says is better. If it is no, or if it's not like better enough, no, or not better enough, you kind of keep doing this addition, right? If you're done, you can break out, and then you're going to ultimately save this as an artifact, okay? And the artifact you can just think of at high level as being like an optimized prompt. And just to be clear, right, like DSPy has a lot of functionality beyond what I'm just going to show you here. This is really just the tip of it, but it helps you understand what I'll say is like the mental model behind DSPy and what things they make easy. And so you can determine if it's the right abstraction for you and your use cases. Anyways, all right, you're going to have your optimized prompt. And let me actually quickly just show you what those look like. Oh, I can't type. Okay, so this one, all right, this is a little bit of a simple one, right? Because it didn't actually do much, at least in this example that I had. It's basically just determining like the structure that it's gonna have to pass along in like system messages to answer the question, right? In this case, it's a relatively simple problem, and frankly, like AEPC probably doesn't even require an LLM. That probably could have just been like a ML model or similar. But anyways, tangent aside, coming back here, once you have your artifact, then you need a way for people to consume. At a high level, really all you're doing is you're taking this optimized artifact and kind of the other pieces that go with it, and you're serving it up to a user. And for this tutorial, we're going to focus primarily on one route, which is going to be like what I'll call the fast API route. It uses like Pydantic models behind the hood, and there's going to be a Swagger page, all that good stuff. This is the approach that's actually like documented in DSPy's docs, as well as like the ML flow path. You can basically do this infinite number of ways once you have kind of that optimized version of it. But in the logs or in the folder structure, you're going to see another version, which is going to be Cloudflare. This is just going to take it and put it into a worker's workers.js file on like V8. And so this is just another way to do it if you like prefer to serve it up on something a little bit lighter where you don't actually have the whole Docker instance. There's tons of other places you could do this. I'm sure you could put this in Palantir, right? It's if you're already in Palantir, maybe there's other ways to handle this whole flow. But point being is there's lots of options once you have artifact that you can expose over API. Okay. All right. So the next part is going to be actually running the model. And so for that, let's just do a quick run. And I have this sample script that I had open code, like make all the pretty formatting so you understand how this works. But ultimately, this is just going to be like the serving endpoint to it. And this is really quick. DSPy does do caching if the prompt is identical, and you can disable that if you want, but it's just going to save you tokens. Let's explain this example. So let me just zoom it in. So first things first, the complaint 1 came in. Again, first step is going to be determining is this AE or PC. And let me actually give you this as well so you can see it side by side. First step is this AE or PC? That's going to be this selection here. And then in this case, I determined it was an adverse event. So the next step is going to be, okay, what kind of category of adverse event is it? In this case, it's hypersensitivity, right? So this is, let me change the color back. Hypersensitivity. Great. Okay, similar flow here for complaint number 2. It's going to determine that it's a product complaint, and ultimately the categorization is going to be device malfunction. So with this, I think you kind of understand the ultimate output, which is a set of models that have been optimized to answering this flow, and this is the architecture. Okay. Now let's talk about how does this actually run, and what options do we have there. So 2 ways that I've set this up. First one is going to be using OpenRouter. And let me show you. Don't worry, I have a script that stars out anything with like API key or similar in it. But there's 2 approaches. One is OpenRouter, or you can have that set to local. You need to define a model. Obviously, if you're going to use a local one, you define it down here. You have to set your base, which is, if you're running this locally, you have to set the base of where you serve this up. But if you're running this off of OpenRouter, the default value is going to be the one to the OpenRouter gateway, so you should be already good and configured there. And then we're going to use 2 of my favorite models, and I'll explain why they're my favorite. So Unsloth-30B, the way I like to think about it is it's a fast model that is really good at tool calling. It's pretty confident in its responses. And so like you cannot use this for knowledge work because it'll just like confidently hallucinate things, kind of like the Anthropic models like to do. But quite a bit worse compared to like something like an Opus or even Sonnet. But if you give it information to ground on, it's quite good, right? And then specifically, I always configure mine to route through the Cerebrus one, just because they're the guys with like the massive chips where the models effectively are running on, I think of it as like L4 cache, but it has crazy memory bandwidth, right? So very quick for inference. The other one, which is going to be this Nemotron model. So we can go, NVIDIA has a, well, actually this is good. There's 2 ways that you can do this, right? If you actually want to use the Nemotron model, it's an MOE model with 3 billion active. But if you want to use that, NVIDIA is actually hosting some of this. You can also just like get a free set of credits if you just sign up as a developer with NVIDIA. But 232 tokens per second. This is going to be your like floating point 16 though. I'm going to run a quantized version of it from Unsloth. There we go. And the reason, obviously, we're going to run a quantized version is this is going to be consumer hardware. So I don't have a graphics card with 63 gigs. And you really do want to have this stuff in VRAM. If you're having to swap or run something on CPU, I mean, it's just going to be miserable. You're not going to have a fun time. And you at that point, you really might as well just use like some cloud model or use something that can fit in VRAM. Anyways, so now you kind of understand the two options. We're going to switch gears and actually quickly do a training run, but we're going to do it actually with one of the local models. All right, so I did not want to do a whole bunch of editing work after this, so this is the best I could do to have you actually still see the PC that we're going to be running on. And just so you kind of get a sense, it's i7 and then it's a 4090 with 24 gigs of VRAM. But let's go to Llama CPP. So within the Llama CPP, you're gonna have a couple of things. You're gonna have your models. This is where you like download your model from Hugging Face, and then you have this serve.sh. Within this, a lot of it is stuff that like I just have. Like for example, I use a speech-to-text model, Parakeet v3, which runs on GPU by default, and it's faster that way. But we're going to be so close on VRAM that I can't do that here, and so we're going to be killing that, and then we're going to be starting up the model. And so you understand this script a little bit. Let me zoom. -ngl, this one's the biggest one, is you have to offload all layers to GPU. Context size, I bumped this up a little bit so that there's plenty of space. Number of parallel slots, that's going to be fairly important. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure your batch is there. And then there's various other like optimizations that you can do with like KV cache and stuff like that. But these are going to be the biggest ones, and short of going to a dumber model or using something like a tiny model that precedes what you're doing and does like the predictive token action for like the larger model, like you're probably not going to get a whole lot faster than this, like at least with this kind of setup. But I'll show you a little bit about why I do like this model. So that serve script that I showed you before, we're going to be running this model, which is 20 gigs by itself. And it's relatively straightforward to run it, although I'll run it in tmux so I can hide the session. Okay, now if we go to this view, you can see we're sitting at 22 out of 24 gigs now instead of like 2 like we had. And then this is going to be running on 8080. Right, like this is pretty decent for something that's entirely local, and something that's like already Q3, which is really it's really pushing what you should do with quants before you like start losing accuracy. But even just looking through some of those results, right, like they're pretty decent. But I will I'll get off my tangent and we'll focus on actually running through one of these use cases. All right, and so you understand how to navigate this. This is all just like within the README, so there's nothing too special. Most of it's just describing how to work with the tool. but this is probably going to be the most relevant. So let me just copy that one. And the reason I say most relevant is like this one I know is, this is like 2 times the number of records, and this one I've already run. So we'll run this one and see what we get. All right, so 209 train, 51 test. So you can see we are stressing the GPU here. All right, so you can see it. He's dropping off, and it's slowly coming down again. By the way, kind of ignore this right here where it said it decreased in score. I think what it's referring to is a decrease from the prior run. And one of those prior runs was against GPT OSS 120, which is definitely more capable of a model. I think the one that matters here is where we started with something like 91 and we got to 93. All right, so we finished the training pipeline, and so we're on to the serving side of the flow, right? And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is relatively straightforward. Once you have the artifact, again, think of it as like an optimized prompt, then you can serve that up with a fast API, or again, there's so many options here, but you'll serve that up. And so let me show that to you. So we have the server still running in the background, right? Like the model running in the background. Right, and then we will go back, and so this is just the home route, and so we'll go to the /docs route, which is the Swagger page. And then let's just pretend that this is like the initial AEPC route that we were trying, and then let's make it something that it's a product complaint. So okay, so it classified as a product complaint. Okay, great. So let's move on to the one that we actually just did the training for. It says the medication arrived warm. Okay, whatever, close enough, right? Temperature control is not maintained during shipping. There you go, storage temperature excursion. And then you have the justification or the reasoning as well. So I hope this was helpful, informative, interesting, whatever. I hope you really appreciate this graphic because I spent more time than I cared to admit on this. So yeah, we'll see you in the next one.